do you think that like unrealized potential has adverse effects on people? Like,
Oh, 100%, dude.
come
Yeah.
on,
Like,
take me
no.
there.
So I talk about this with people all the time that here's just an easy example. I believe that when you don't express your passion, when you're not pouring it into, like when you don't have an outlet for it, it doesn't go away. It just turns into anger. Because when you don't have emotions to express, you just use the only one you have available, which is anger. So why are people so furious on the internet? They're not passionately creating in any other part of their life. Like happy, busy people don't have time to hate people on the internet. They're too busy doing other
Yeah.
stuff. But when you don't have an outlet and you're not living up to that potential, it just mutates. It mutates into shame. It mutates into bitterness. It mutates into anger. And it doesn't go away.
Yeah.
It just turns into things you don't want it to turn into. So yes, there's a significant, I mean, scientists have studied that where you remember the things you didn't do more than the things you did. You remember
Oh,
the unfinished goals. They call it I think it's called the Zygonaut effect, where you remember those things more than the things you actually did. And so it has a weight, like it has a real emotional, physical weight, definitely.
and it's also my Dungeon and Dragons name.
D&D. I would know you're really
Zygarnart.
into, yeah, D&D. Got some dice, multi-sided dice. I like it.
Oh my goodness. So why do you think that some of that just eludes us? So I know we talked about distractions a little bit
Yeah.
earlier, but is it a matter of being lazy or unmotivated, or is there something more to the story?
I mean, I think it can be lazy, but I think some of it starts with fear. I think fear often is the start of it. Um, so it could be something as simple as, you never saw it modeled in your childhood.
Mm.
Like I remember I was on a podcast with this guy, Steven Scoggins, and his dad's soundtrack that he would say in the family is Scoggins don't get ahead, Scoggins get by. So imagine you're a little kid in that house and your dad, who you look up to, is saying over and over again, hey, we don't get ahead. We don't get ahead. We don't get ahead. I would never say to him, that 23-year-old him, like, why aren't you trying to get ahead? His soundtrack for 15 years was people with our last name don't get ahead. And so sometimes it's old family of origin stuff. Sometimes it's, fear. It can be procrastination, perfectionism. Um, Sometimes it's not knowing where to start. You're overwhelmed. Sometimes it's the busyness of life. There's also that, I always tell people when you hear advice from authors, you should say, are you married? Do you have kids? What are their ages? Do you have a full-time job? Like you should ask questions because that's the other thing is that sometimes you get advice for a season of life you're not in yet.
Yeah.
Like I had to get up early at 5 a.m. in part because I had two kids under the age of 4.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't write on a Saturday for a couple hours and tell my wife like, hey, I really want to just spend some time thinking about adjectives today. So if you could take the kids, that'd be like, that wouldn't work. So sometimes it's people are busy, they're overwhelmed. So I think there's a variety of reasons, but the biggest one by far to me would be fear.
Yeah, that's good.
Wow. So, okay, John. So, like, as we start down this journey of like, okay, I want to create goals. I want to create achievable goals. I want to reach my potential. Like, okay, yeah, you got me. I'm ready here. One of the first things you do is it's so whiplashing because you say, now let's not look forward. Let's look back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm sorry, what? Yeah, because like, no, I want goals, John. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go to the
Yeah.
future. And you go like, now turn around.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Well, so part of that is I've got this thing called the Guaranteed Goals Community, where it's an all year program where I help real people with their real goals. And so that's changed my advice because I've spent the last couple of years in the trenches with real people. So there's things you say on Instagram, and then there's things as they really work in somebody's real busy, messy life. And so one of the things you say on Instagram is something like, sometimes you have to jump off a cliff and grow wings on the way down. Like, and you're like, that's never how gravity works. That's just really not how, like a friend of mine used to say it, a God version. He'd go, sometimes we jump out of the plane when God was going to land it. We go, I'm doing this for Jesus. And he's like, I didn't, no, don't put that on me. I didn't tell you to do that. Like we were going to land this in like 2 months. And then we crash and we're like, Jesus messed up. And he's like, no, I didn't tell you to do that. So some of the advice about you've got to figure out your life. You have to have a plan. You have to have a vision. And sometimes it's just we misinterpret things. So one of the things I think we've misinterpreted is the obviously fantastic book, 7 Habits by Stephen Covey. one of his ideas is begin with the end in mind. And we've misinterpreted that into, I need to know the end before I begin.
Yeah.
And I need to know the final step. I need to know where this is going. I need to have the plan. I'll have people say to me, they'll go, I want to write a book, but I don't have, like, what if somebody tries to steal the content? And I'll go, have you written a single page? And they're like, no. And I'm like, you're trying to prevent a thing that is so far from ever happening. Like, it's so far from ever happening. So I felt stuck. Like, anytime someone would say, what's your big hairy goal? What's your life plan? What do you want to be when you grow up? That paralyzed me, dude. And I've written a ton of these kind of books. So I felt stuck in my present. I felt intimidated, overwhelmed by my future. So it only left me one direction. And so all I did was I wrote the words best moments on a piece of paper in the Augusta, Georgia airport. And I just kind of opened my head and my heart to look for moments from my past that were best to me, where God lit me up, where he, the sun felt different. And it wasn't super deliberate. I didn't know it'd be in a book. It was, again, like, it was from my own life going, okay, I got to figure out some sort of thing. And what happened was what was a couple items turned into 171 items.
Wow.
And I was surprised by it because I've done a million goal exercises before. I'm such a goal nerd. But the first thing it taught me was gratefulness. Like, everybody talks about you should be more grateful, but, like, I always go, well, how? This taught me gratefulness. Like, I could actually see things I had forgotten. Number two, it taught me self-awareness. You can't change your life if you don't have self-awareness. Like, the leader who gets fired for anger thought he was passionate. Like, the young person that's dated 10 losers doesn't have the self-awareness to go, wait, I'm the one thing in common. I got to work on this before I get back into the dating pool. And so it made me self-aware. And then it was also the opposite of everything I'd been taught, in that, like, I believe we're obsessed right now as a culture with sadness and trauma. Like, I saw a study where for every 100 scientific studies on sadness, there's only one written on joy. Because we as a culture, so what happens often in culture is we ricochet to the other, like, we overcorrect. So we go from not talking about trauma at all to everything is through the lens of trauma. So, like, every counseling session I'd ever been to, we would spend tons of time on trauma. Every small group I've ever been in, the first 6 weeks where we told our stories were 6 of the saddest weeks of going, here's another terrible thing that happened in our marriage. It was 6 weeks. Like, very rarely do I have somebody go, I want to explore the things, like, what's the joy? We think there's nothing to learn from joy. And so all of a sudden, I started to learn about who I really was from all these moments.
Yeah.
And then when you ask your head and your heart to find moments that light you up in your past, they automatically start looking in your present. They automatically start going, like, in a moment, you'll go, oh, like, I remember this woman, because I tested it with hundreds of people. She said, I had a best moment today. I was watching my grandson get off the bus. And when he got off, he changed his entire route to make sure he could stomp through a puddle. She said, that was such a best moment for me to watch. And that wasn't massive at all, but she might have missed it had she not said to her head and her heart, hey, be on the lookout for best moments, like, be on the lookout. So it was just this crazy experience. And then again, I tested it with people and I'd say, come up with 30. And they'd always come up with 50 or 100. Like, there were people that came up with 300. Like, once they got started, it was so counterintuitive to culturally what we say is things like, don't look back, you're not headed that direction. As if you have nothing to learn from your past. Like, what? Like, which is easier, to go dream about the next 20 blank years, or find 15 things from the last 5 years that really lit you up? And that's what this exercise became.
And now, take that with us. So like, you created your own list. This isn't something you're just telling people to do. You created this epic list, which, by the way, there was significantly more large crustacean on your list than.
Yeah. Who knew they'd make so many appearances? So many cameos.
You talk about a buddy of yours in the book. You got a giant lobster, and it was a moment for you.
9 pound, yeah.
I didn't even know they made them that big,
dude. It was $5 a pound. It was $45 for an. Are you kidding me? Best deal of the century.
9 pound lobster. Like, this was like an obese lobster.
No. It was like a 70-year-old lobster. Like, that lobster
really
had
old.
He had gone through World War II. He survived like Nazi submarines on the coast of
but
Canada.
He didn't survive Jon Acuff and his friend.
No, that was dude. It was the best.
It's funny. We actually go to the grocery store, and my kids love stopping by the lobster tank.
Yeah. course.
And so now we have this fun game, and none of us know the truth, but we're like, wonder how old that guy is. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
that's a little baby lobster. And like, that's like the old man in the tank.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So you can tell your kids you met somebody who had a really old lobster in his life.
Yeah, I love that.
So like, but this list, how does this list become future goals? Like, how does like looking at the past and looking at what brings you joy and lights you up in those best moments, how do they become future goals?
Dude, it's so simple. So what always happens is anyone who does this goes, I want more of that. There comes a point in the list where you go, oh, I want more of that. So essentially you're saying, I want to be deliberate about that. I want to be intentional about that. And often you find things you forgot you loved. And like, I talked to somebody today and he said, man, I'm kind of an introvert and I thought travel would be high on my list and I'd be all about the travel. And the only travel trips I put down were ones where I met new people. I think I'm really about people. And so you learn about yourself. And so then it flips into, I want to do more of that in the future. And then it becomes this really subtle life planning tool where you go, okay, look at all these things. I want to bring these forward. I want these in my Tuesday. I want these in my next month. And you're not doing fake goals. What trips people up around goals is they write down things they think they should want to do. So they go, I'll do this, I'll do that. And they inherit all these goals from society or they inherit goals from like parents. And then they inevitably don't do them because they don't really care about them in the first place. They were fake goals to begin with. But when you plan from a list of things that you go, man, these things lit me up, they're so much more fun to accomplish because you actually care about them.
Wow.
Yeah. What I love about that is I fail at goals when it's something that I want to do versus someone who I want to be closer to becoming. So I feel like a lot of what you just shared, even around what lights you up, I feel like especially as followers of Jesus, is a signal to like, hey, God's teaching you something about the way that he's wired you is making you react in that way. So become more like that.
Love that.
Yeah,
and
lean into that. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so like, I love that you just shared so much of those moments. It sounds like were also moments of like, this is who I am, not necessarily this is what I do.
Yeah, you're not like, I think about goals as don't look at them through the frame of fixing problems. Look at it through opening gifts. Fixing problems, man, it's so shame-based. It's like you kind of beat yourself into performance. Opening gifts is like, wow, this is something that I was designed to do. And the problem, I think part of it is if you don't believe we have a generous, fun, creative, giving God, it's hard. And here's a simple sign like that I see people do. I see this in Nashville all the time. People go, hey, do you like living in Nashville? And some Christian will go, we love it. I can't see us ever living somewhere different unless God moves us. What a jerk God that is. Like, we love it here. We love it. Unless God ruins it, unless he's trying to ruin us. I used to see that in college. People would be like, man, I hope he doesn't call me to the mission field. He won't. If you're not wired for that, like that would be like if I said, man, I hope God doesn't make me teach calculus. Well, of course not. I'm a writer. Like I'm getting excited about like Netflix and goals and like he's not in heaven going, hey, you know how you love this thing? Oh, I can't wait to ruin it. I'm gonna no, he doesn't have me building houses for people because I'm not a carpenter.
Yeah.
Like he has me doing other things because he knows me and made me and loves me. And if like, that's the other side of it.
I love that, John. And I love the simple fact that God put the passion in you. The very thing that loves calculus was it's not like God was surprised by that.
Somebody else got that. Somebody like I remember Dan Cathy, a Chick-fil-A CEO. He used to tell me because we did a bunch of work together, and I learned a ton from him. He would say, "I believe the yoke is light and burden is easy." Is like when you're in your thing, to you it is. People on the outside go, "I could never do that." So somebody might go, "I could never run a church. I could never be a stay-at-home mom with 4 kids." Yeah, exactly. But I'm in my thing, so the burden is light and easy. And so like this is my thing. And so that to me is what the really fun like God angle of it. But where it turns into a life plan is so you start to categorize it. So that was the other element that happened is I have a list of 171 and I go, but are there categories? Is there a framework? Like I'm always going, what do I do with this on a Tuesday? I don't like when people give me advice that's fuzzy and vague. I'm always going, what do I do with this on a real Tuesday? And so I study the list, study other people's lists. And it was like, and I put this in the book, it was like that moment where you stare at a 3D poster and the image pops out. There were 4 categories that every moment fit into, and they're so simple. One was an experience. So a moment you experienced. One was an accomplishment where your effort was part of the moment. One was a relationship where the people were the moment, and one was an object. And the metaphor I use in the book is, if you go on a hike by yourself, that's an experience. If you go on a hike with a friend and they're going through a divorce and you pour into them, that's a relationship moment. Like, we go to a small group dinner every Wednesday night. If I went to the same restaurant without those people, it wouldn't be a best moment. The people are the point.
Mm-hmm.
An accomplishment moment would be if you hiked that trail faster than you'd ever hiked it. Like, you have a Garmin and you tracked it and you did it. You crushed your goal. And an object would be you took a pine cone home because you wanted to remember the moment. So what happened was I started to encourage people, label your lists, like, because I think you're going to learn something. And people were always surprised. So they'd go, like, for me, it was like, man, I'm really into accomplishments. And I kind of grew up, I heard some, Christian leaders be like, oh, you shouldn't, success is bad. Jesus rode a donkey, like all this broken success talk. And I felt bad about accomplishments. And then God was like, hey, look at your list. Like, the majority is accomplishments. I made you to go. Let's go. And then other people would be like, man, I'm a relationship person, but I haven't been pursuing relationships. No wonder I feel so low. Like, COVID wrecked me. I'm built for relationships. I call it the most honest personality test you'll ever take, because I've lied on every personality test to some degree. Because some of the questions, you're like, I know what they want me to say. They go, okay, would you ever help somebody? Do you like being generous? Like, you're not gonna be like, nah, screw people. Nah. Like, we all on personality tests are like, I could see me doing that. And you're like, So this one is just built off what's real. And again, you look at these categories and it teaches you. And then even more so, you go, man, I need to add more experiences to my life. I need to be okay with accomplishing. I need to find more relationships. Like, it changes how you live forward.
Yeah, it's funny. So I don't know if you would remember this, but it was a moment that stuck out to me. So you were at Orange Tour a couple years ago. And one of the things,
I hope it's a good moment. I hope this
totally was.
Okay.
And you were just kind of sharing that, like, sometimes even in like the space that you put yourself in, then that changes how you pray or how you talk. And so the example that you gave was when you get into church, that sometimes you find yourself in a dark place and the worship leader starts praying, and it's like a sad prayer.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that has just, and then the kind of challenge you gave, and so I would say at our church, I don't know that that's always the case, but it was a good word picture to also remember to go to God with joy. And to say, hey, God, it's okay to say, hey, God, thank you so much for making me love this thing. Or, hey, my life is actually feeling really good right now. And you don't always have to find yourself in that place where you're only communicating with God around like, oh my goodness, like everything is so terrible. And we should do that. But just what that balance is around, like, God also wants to hear, oh my goodness, thank you for this opportunity. I actually loved it. Can you give me more of it? And so anyway, that struck me.
God. Yeah, like I don't know if I said that then, but the lesson for me years and years ago was I told God, like, I only know how to cry with you. I don't know how to dance with you.
Yeah.
And I felt like he was like, then I just got to give you lots of reasons to dance. Let's go. And so for me, the joke I do that I did that day was, why does every worship leader assume I've had a terrible week?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
why do they always go like, we don't know what garbage you came in carrying today, but you're a garbage person. You're terrible, but we're glad you're here. You never hear Nike do that. Nike never goes, hey, gross person on a couch. You're disgusting. You want to buy some sneakers? They share the promise. And my thing is, we have the real promise. Like, we should be the most joyful. So definitely say, if you came in here carrying something, we're here for you, blah, blah, blah. But also be like, also, how beautiful is our God? Also, how great. Like, I want to high five God too, not just go, here's the sucky things that happened to me this week. I want to be like, dude, did you see? Like, I remember I was praying maybe about a month ago. And I was like, God, I'm sorry I'm so obsessed with growth. Like, I'm sorry, like, I'm always trying to grow things. And I felt like he was like, hey, in the Bible, who grows and who destroys? Like, have you ever seen the enemy grow something? And I was like, not really. He's like, yeah, that's right. He's all destruction, all lies, evil can only destroy. That's why, like, even when you see stuff in culture and you go, I don't know what their point is. If it's evil, there's no new thing. It can only destroy. God's all growth. And I felt like, I was like, no. Like, who do you think put the desire to grow in you? Let's go. That's one of those happy moments where I'm like, all right, let's do it.
Totally. And I feel like even following the parable with the different people who are given different things to go invest. And it's like the one who just was like, you know what? If it's been given to me, like, then it's got to have potential. I'm going to go find it. And so just not wasting those opportunities that God's putting right in front of us to go after the potential he has for us.